everybody, welcome back.
Hello.
This is Bad Marriages in the Bible, and we are your hosts. I'm Sean.
I'm Kate.
And we run Dandelion Ministries, which we've told you before, but is about creating space for you to experience and to know the grace of Jesus Christ in your place of need, where you actually need to feel it and to know it and to be assured of his love and mercy for you. And we do that in lots of different ways, this podcast being one. You can check it all out at dandelionministries.org. But we are spending time looking at the marriages in the Bible, and we specifically like to call out the bad marriages because
it rhymes.
It just sounds better. And it's provocative, so that's why you're listening. Like, ooh, what do they mean? And but it's also just where people, all of us are. We're all dealing with our primary relationships. This is where we see and experience our sin. So it's where we see and experience our need very deeply. And so if you go back to our vision statement, it makes sense why we'd be talking about this. So anyway, we're in Song of Solomon, and we are spending some time looking at this sex book in the middle of the Bible.
It's true.
It's like, it is the Bible's, version of
the erotic.
There it is. Yeah. So it's
erotic poetry.
It's telling us about God's created way of making
procreation.
Thank you. I'm trying to find the words. I was gonna say, he created sex. He made it the means by which he brings new life into the world. And it's something that he loves and he celebrates. And since we're talking about relationships, it's also one of those places where we also feel our need very deeply, because it does speak to our needs for safety, for security, for feeling connected, for having that sense of being bonded to somebody.
Belonging. A
That's
place
right.
of belonging.
Yeah. All of that is wrapped up in this. And so we are spending time looking at this book that was written by, as we've talked about, it's attributed to King Solomon, who famously was very good at making love to many, many women. So
it is ironic, but also very true to the nature of God's redemption. That we say bad marriages, but big redemption. And that it's nothing that we've brought to the table. We point to our weaknesses because it shows his great love for us and his the power of his redemption, his power to make beauty and new life out of ashes, out of our sin, and so out of death. So that's why he uses sinners to point to what he's done. And that's exactly what having this authorship attributed to Solomon does.
That's right. It's like Paul, and Paul says that he's going to boast in his weaknesses.
That's right.
And there are people out there that kind of balk at that on some level. It's like, oh, you're just bragging about how you're a sinner, and like you're kind of bragging your sin. It's like, no, that's what you think when you don't actually have connection.
When you haven't gone through repentance.
You think that when you think that you've got it together.
When you're out of touch with what you've just done to somebody else.
Yeah. But when you know the depths of your brokenness, and when you know what God's mercy has meant for you, where you're really hurting and where you really can't get it together, then it is such incredible news. And Paul saying, I boast in my weakness, and seeing a letter attributed to Solomon, who had 700 wives and 300 concubines, being all about love and romantic, like monogamous fidelity, wonderful, beautiful love.
Sex within marriage too,
It is like, it's great. It's not just great. It is the good news. It's the news that Jesus Christ actually redeems sinners. That's what he does. He brings new life out of death. That is what Kate said. And praise God, because the Bible paints a very clear picture, as we've talked about many, many times, but we are actually the walking dead. That is what we are. And we need to be nothing short of given new life. We need to be brought to new life.
That's right. And the people who assembled the Bible, they knew what they were doing when they called it the Song of Solomon. They knew it was probably many authors, a collection of poems over maybe 100 or so years of love poems. Perhaps, or perhaps really his love poetry with one of his wives that he wanted to celebrate. Perhaps a Shulamite who was a shepherdess. That's who it really is in the poem. But so all of those issues, they still want to call it. I mean, sometimes you might have heard of it called the Song of Songs, being like, this is a superlative song. This is a superlative collection of poetry about love. And it can relate to your faith. It can relate to Jesus's love for the church, and for, sinful people that he has redeemed and made a pure, spotless bride. It can relate to that. And it can also relate to the power of love within marriage and intimacy. So it could be, you might have heard of it called the Song of Songs, but frequently it's just called the Song of Solomon.
That's right.
And for good reason.
For good reason. And so we have been talking about it as a picture of Hebrew poetry. It is Hebrew poetry, and it takes us on this journey between two people, really, exploring their relationship, and it has a few movements in it. And we've finished the first section that took us through chapter 2, verse 7. And we see that it's moving, kind of inward at the beginning to the center, which is the marriage ceremony, and then kind of back out at the end. But it's pointing into the marriage both ways. That was as clear as mud, right? The front end is pointing ahead to the marriage, and the back end is pointing back to the marriage.
Yes.
That made sense, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, and so we are now into the second section here. And there are ways to read it chronologically, as if it's kind of a story unfolding. But I think the poetry reads really well what I just described so wonderfully clearly to you. But where it's kind of both pointing in to the marriage, the actual wedding ceremony and wedding night. But we see repeatedly they're kind of, frankly, these little moments, these vignettes of courtship and kind of pursuit and building towards sex, where they're actually making love. And we see there's so much emotive language in there. We talked about last week with the imagery. And this week we're going to see some more of that, where they're moving again now into another kind of pursuit moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of seeking and finding and wanting and desiring and all of that, and then moving to consummation. And so this week, thanks, Kate, she affirmed that. And she's looking at me like, what is he talking about? But we're here now.
Well, I think you're talking about the different poets. There's like maybe 5 poems. Some people say it's 11 poems. People can find many different poems within them, but
sure.
Let's work with the 5.
We're working with 5.
Yeah, the 5. And each poem seems to end with consummation.
Thank you.
So if you read it chronologically, it seems like, they look like they're having sex before they're married, because the marriage is in the middle, smack in the middle, right in the middle. There's 100 verses before it and 100 verses after it. It's in chapter 4. But
I called them the technical terms of front end and back end earlier.
There you go.
It's not a technical term at all. Go ahead.
So we're entering into the second poetry cycle, and it does end with what could be read as them consummating, this
That's the way I like to read it.
But if you see this whole thing as under the umbrella of marriage, then it's just fine.
Yeah.
Well, or you could read it as intense longing. Could read it that way too.
Well, and I think there's intense longing and consummation that happens.
There you go.
I think that's the way to go with it.
I agree with you.
And so we are now at chapter 2, verse 8 and following. Okay. And so this is where some of the most famous verses, at least some of my favorite verses in this book, are here in this section. And it's where, again, we hear it's coming from the perspective of the woman, which is just, again, an incredible thing, because the Bible is really celebrating the woman's point of view here in the love relationship. It's not the man's. And so it begins from her, and she's talking about her beloved, and he's leaping over the mountains. This is the way that Kate talks about me all the time. Leaping over the mountains, bounding over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, there he stands behind our wall.
I mean, what man wouldn't love to hear that from his wife?
That's right. I'm like a young stag.
You are like a young stag to
I'm
me.
a gazelle.
The gazelle is different.
Gazelle's running for its life, usually. It's like, oh, there's a lion, run. But don't think of it that way. And so she's seeing him and she's appreciating him. She's admiring his physical prowess, obviously, right? He's athletic, at the very least. I mean, have you ever seen a fat stag? No. Or an out of shape gazelle? No, they don't exist. So praise God. And so then it goes on, and it turns then, and he begins to speak to her. And these are some of the verses that I've quoted to Kate in different Valentine's Day cards and things like that over the years. And but he says, "Arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away. For behold, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth. The time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land." And he goes on and on. But I really love that. It's just this, we talked about this, the imagery with the springtime and flowers and all of that. And it's really just talking about life. It's giving us a picture of new life, what we just described, coming out of, that God brings new life out of the ashes. And so there's just a wonderful picture here of what love does to you on one level. What do you think, Kate?
Now I was remembering when you gave me that card. We were about to get married. We got married after I graduated college. We were long distance for 5 years. Went to different colleges, different high schools, opposite sides of the state, sometimes in different countries. But I remember you wrote a card to me about that. And college was a hard time for me. Very rich time, but it wasn't like the typical like party, super fun. It was more a growing time for me. And I remember you quoted that, and I remember crying, and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like that's true, and I was so excited to get married to you.
Me too. I was too. I was like, the winter is over. We were engaged for how long?
A year and a half.
We were engaged for a year and a half. We dated for 5 years before that. So I was like, this has been a long ass winter. I was like, let's go. It's springtime. But yes, so that is true. It just, I mean, I love the poetry there. To me, it captures that, and it really points to, I think, a deeper reality that there's, with God, love begets love, right? And like faith creates something new in us. That's the way he is. We've talked about how this book, there's always the natural aspect of what's going on, and it's between these two people, and they're really into each other. She's got the hots for him. She's calling him a really hot stag, and then he is looking at her and saying, like, it is time. The spring is here. The winter is over. My beautiful one. And so we see in the natural, they are just all about each other. Their passion is deep, and they are really excited to be together. And
it feels like spring.
And it is rejuvenating at the very, it brings something to life in you. And when you're in a relationship, when you feel that safety and that desire from somebody else, even if it's somebody you don't really like, if you find out like that this person you don't really like really likes you, or has some sort of crush on you or something like that, or you get a Valentine's Day card. I mean, you remember what it's like. Yeah, you're like, oh,
you get full of life.
It's nice when somebody likes you, right?
I was just at the aquarium yesterday with our daughter, and seahorses mate for life.
Yes.
And they have elaborate courtship dances that they do every day.
Every day.
It's spring every day for the
For
little
the
seahorses.
Go to your aquarium, everyone. That's your homework this week. And
the dads are super involved in caring for the eggs and being involved with the children.
The dads carry the eggs in their pouch.
It's Song of Songs. Well, actually, there are no kids in Song of Songs. So we're talking about procreative love of God right now.
Yes.
The creative love of God. And that is true. And children are definitely a part of that in the rest of the Bible. But this is actually just for the joy of being loved by your lover.
Right. It's not saying that you're doing this just to get to an end. It's not a means to an end.
No.
But it is also saying that all of that is, if I may use the word, pregnant in the language. Like it's all in there. It's saying like the springtime is here. And it's like, so it's carrying the fact that this is life force happening.
Right.
Like this is the way life happens.
Eggs will usually happen. Zygotes and embryos will usually happen after this. But
you're right.
But it pulls back and it says this is enough too, actually. This is beautiful in of itself.
It's giving it, it's this book is giving sex and romantic love its moment in the sunshine. It's just saying like, this is it. This is great. This is worth it. We've heard so many times as we've been walking through the marriages thus far that is what they're often concerned about their offspring. Like,
yes.
It's been
carrying on the family name.
Right?
Yes.
Ever since the first gospel promise in Genesis 3:15, where God says the offspring of the woman is going to crush the head of the serpent, you know? And so we've been very concerned about where's the offspring and who it is and how it's coming. And yet here we have this moment where God is taking a pause. It's like this wonderful little timeout and be like, we're going to just sit here and hang out with sex and romance.
That's right. Because, and then this is where it expands into a more universal understanding, and we'll move into more of a typological interpretation here, where you can, any person, celibate, ex, single, not married or married to, can relate to Jesus in this way because of what you were saying earlier, the way God envisions us, the church, his people, as the bride of Christ. And that the whole Bible ends in Revelation with a picture of God's people rising like a pure, spotless bride to the marriage supper, with Jesus is depicted as a lamb. So like all of that.
All mixed up in there.
We're all getting married to a sacrificial lamb.
Right. And we're all also like eating at the table and it's all mixed in there. Communion, marriage, Jesus' sacrifice. Anyway.
That's apocalyptic prophecy and imagery mixed in with poetry, and it's beautiful. It's so this, what a husband and wife experience together, is just a foretaste, is getting you ready for the kind of intimacy that is much larger than sexual intimacy. It's, he's the creator of all kinds of love. And so he's much bigger than that. But it's an intimacy and a oneness with God himself. And go ahead and read from it.
Yeah, so this is Revelation 21, which is, if you never even read Revelation, you've probably heard these verses. Revelation can be a very intimidating book sometimes, but this is the crescendo, really, of the book and of the Bible, where John is the one who wrote this, the same one who wrote the Gospel John, who was the one who was the beloved of Jesus. And like it's
close friend.
Close friend. Sorry, what did I? Yeah,
beloved, but like we've been saying beloved a lot in Song of Songs.
Yes,
not that way.
Not that way.
Close friend.
The one with whom,
like
the one he
friend.
loved the most, as far as that goes, as friendship goes. So then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God." And this is the part that sounds so much to me like Song of Solomon, chapter 2. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. You can hear him, and he says, behold, I am making all things new. The winter is past. The rain is over. The time for singing has come. This is what we see, the fulfillment of Song of Solomon, really, as far as, I think you said in the typological sense, with our marriage with Jesus. That's the picture of the Bible, is that, the romance, the love, all of the things that we love about love, all come from him and are pointing ahead to the culmination of that, the real true fulfillment in him, when truly the winter will pass. All of the things that cause pain will be gone.
And I want to underscore too the sense of safety and assurance that's in that. And that's where sex, in the natural, sex thrives, when there's safety and assurance and you feel really secure. When you don't, when you feel anxious or uncertain or, ashamed or doubting each other or suspicious or worried, that is also going to be reflected. And you see none of that in this, in these poems. There's just longing and desire and safety and mutual appreciation and affection and reciprocation. And so there's just so much safety and assurance in this. And that is something that any Christian can also have. That's why it's so easy to read this and think about your faith with Jesus. Arise, my beautiful one, and come away, because he makes it safe. Even in light of sin, even in light of wars and brokenness and cancer and death, it's still safe because his love is stronger and he is that bridegroom who is always faithful and never fails.
That's right. It's like Lego Movie, which we have been watching with our kids. We always watch these movies over and over again with our children. And anyway, in Lego Movie, they talk about the special, the prophecy of the special.
Oh, yeah.
And the special is going to be the most interesting, amazing, blah, 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 blah person, in all of the world. And everybody wants to feel that way. That's what Lucy, the little girl Lego, says to Emmett when she, confesses that she wanted to be the special. And that is what you're describing. And that is what we all are desperate for. And what we get a taste of on this earth, definitely in romantic relationships. But we also feel it in friendships, really deep, meaningful friendships, where where that person just loves being with you and hangs out with you and thinks you're just the funniest thing ever, but that's what the Lord is. That's what we are going to experience from the Lord. And we do in our faith here, where he comes and says, you are the most important, special, amazing, lovely person. You're worth everything. You're worth me giving my life for. Like, I love you more than anything. I mean, that's what Jesus is actually saying to all of us, and through his word. And that's an incredible thing. Yes. So like, even if we, as we've said, our relationships show us our greatest need often, even when we have really good ones, there's still like this feeling of needing fulfillment of, something even more. We can't be that for everybody. For each other,
we're limited. Right? We're limited people.
And so that's like the amazing thing about our relationship with the Lord, is that
he is unlimited.
There you go. And it's unconditional, and it is everything you just described, which is safe and free and he won't
be shaken. You can't shake him loose,
Right.
You can't shake him loose. There's nothing that is going to be too bad for his redemption, for his love, for his forgiveness.
That's right. And so that is the great news for all of us, married, single, divorced, whatever it may be, that we have a God that looks at us like this bridegroom is looking at his bride, and says these words to us. That's and right. Calls us out of the cleft of the rock. I mean, that's the thing. He's calling us out of the place of fear and shame where our sin takes us, where we would say to Paul, like, you should never boast in your weakness. You should be showing us how you've accomplished more, or how you're, living your best life now, or whatever it is.
Right. You hide, you suppress those things.
That's right. Keep that
lock them away
stuff down so that no one will ever see it again. And Jesus is like, no, I've
Mm.
come for that. That's the thing that's so annoying, frankly, when you become a
Mm.
Christian, is that he doesn't leave you alone. He keeps on pulling things out into the light, not because he's just trying to embarrass you or anything like that, but he is not trying. He is setting you free from that thing.
And he loves you, and he
Of
knows that
course.
it's hurting you.
Yeah, it's hurting you. It's
Yeah.
causing you to hide. It's actually the things that we hide or that we keep the secrets over, or we try to keep suppressed and all that stuff, are actually running the show.
Especially the thing that you think isn't, that nobody knows about, so it's not hurting anybody. It is hurting other people.
Well, it's certainly
hurting
hurting
you.
and then the reality is it's preventing you from actually being fully present and fully open. What you're describing here in Song of Solomon, what you were saying, like it's preventing you from actually being able to go there with anybody.
That's right.
You actually are incapable of true intimacy. And so it is like a cancer that you don't see, or you're just hiding. And Jesus is like, no, I've come to put that to death, because I want you to have new life. I want you to experience the springtime.
So you see that with, the imagery of catch the foxes that are in our vineyards, come out of the cleft of the rock where you're hiding. That is the kind of love that he has for us. And that's the kind of love that he loves us through our spouses too.
That's right. The other night, this is another little illustration for you all. The other night I don't even know what we were doing, but Kate said to me, "What is that in the yard?" And so I said, "I don't know." And I looked out, and looked like this weird animal out there. And I was not in the mood to go check on the animal. And so we sent the kids out, which I thought was really funny looking back on it. So it could have been like a rabid raccoon or something. Like, let the girls go check. And but they went out and looked, and it was a cat. It was this little gray cat that was missing an eye. It was partly, definitely, like, we thought it was completely blind. But anyway, it was just sitting and hanging out in our yard, and it was
probably
lost.
deaf.
And it was, curled up in a little ball. And it just made me think of it was a perfect picture of us on one level, like hiding in the cleft of the rock. And, Kate was super concerned for this little cat, and then tried to call him out, tried to get him to come to her, tried to feed him and make that. I mean, we eventually had to call some animal rescue folks, which they then did. I mean, that's the thing. When you're hurt and when you're hurting, when you're scared, when shame is running the show, you don't even recognize help for what it is. And you still try to run away. He ran and hid behind the wood pile, all this kind of stuff. But they eventually were able to get him out, and they put him into a safe little carriage. They took him and got him all checked by the vet and everything, and they sent us pictures of him, and
fed him.
He's now doing great. And that's the image I want you to have when the Lord is saying this stuff to us, when he's working in our lives, when he's calling us out of the cleft of the rock. We're often terrified, and we would not do it. We would, that's why we're hiding. Our thinking is to keep us hidden.
Right.
And he's calling us out because he's actually going to shower us with love and to hold us close to his chest, and to just take care of us, to heal us, to actually give us all the things we need that we're not getting on our own, hiding, right? So anyway, it just made me think of the little cat that Kate rescued the other day. And but that is I think it's an accurate picture for us, and it's what we're seeing in the natural. We're seeing it actually bear that fruit in their relationship
here in the poem.
In the poem, yeah,
absolutely, because she opens like a flower to him, and she's like, "Oh, I feel so loved in my most hidden spot, my most shameful places. I feel so loved." And then she just has this utterance. My beloved is mine, and I am his. My whole body is his, and his whole body is mine. And she feels so safe, and they just belong to each other. And she's home, and they belong to each other. And I love the way that there's so much mutuality, and the way there's reciprocal love in this poem, because she says this here in chapter 2, verse 16. And then it happens again. They say the same thing. She says the same thing in chapter 6, verse 3, but reverses it. I am my beloved's and he is mine. So in this case, it's my beloved is mine and I am his. And then I am my beloved's and he is mine. And so they both just belong to each other and their bodies belong to each other. Paul says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, that, a wife's body doesn't belong to herself. It belongs to her husband, and a husband's body belongs to his wife. And that is like nutso for.
That was seriously socially crazy, right?
Yeah.
Culturally nuts for Paul to say that.
Right. Exactly. But it's Christian. It's not Roman Empire mentality. It's a Christian mentality. It's a supernatural. It's a revealed mentality that God gives to you when he gives you his gaze for each other. And it's still not popular today. My body is mine,
That's right. I get to say what happens to my body and vice versa.
Yeah. And so the idea of us belonging to each other, to be interdependent, to be mutual, to be mutually laying down our lives for each other, to not be going for revenge, but for reconciliation. Those are all supernatural, revealed concepts that come from Jesus, from his forgiveness and grace for all of us. So she says, I am my beloved's or my beloved is mine and I am his. And then she's like, I want him to make love to me all night long. Basically with poetic language. Let him graze among the lilies until the day breathes and the shadows flee. And then she says that again, turn like a gazelle or a young stag among the mountains, as if her body is the mountains.
That's right. The Grand Tetons, which is what that means. If you've ever been to Wyoming, that's what that means. It just means the big titties.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
oh my gosh,
that?
no.
That's what that means. And so that is what she's saying. And we have hiked the Grand Tetons. And you can think of whatever you think about that.
See, the Native Americans were very comfortable with their sexuality also.
So it's true. And that's what she's pulling the Lionel Ritchie all night long. And she is saying, let's do this. And it's as happy as his video for that. If you ever have seen it,
it's a very happy
video. And it's the 80s, man. The 80s were just a happier time. And
they were all maybe on drugs. Everybody was quite skinny. So
anyway,
it's very colorful.
But that is what she's saying. And we're seeing that is the fulfillment. That's the natural response to like what you said, the safety, the love, everything. It actually opens you up. And actually, when you are feeling all of that safety, it's easier to be vulnerable, and like you actually can share everything about yourself. And it's a beautiful picture.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, that's all I have to say. Yeah. So this has been a great episode. I'll just end with that. It's a beautiful picture. So go listen to All Night Long, Lionel Ritchie. Watch the YouTube video if you can find it, because it's worth it. It's just worth it. The guy is so quintessential 80s. It's just a nice thing to see. And find yourself a stray cat to save and call it out of the cleft of wherever. And what was the first one? I forget.
Arise, my beautiful one. Oh, spring.
Springtime. There was something in there.
I don't know. Read the Bible.
Read the Bible, everyone. Just read the Bible.
I don't know.
I said something at the beginning. Go back and listen to the beginning of the episode. But we are so grateful for you guys being with us today. And we hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, or even if you didn't, give us a positive review and tell your friends and family to listen to it. And on your podcast platforms, whatever it may be. And also, you can find in the show notes our website, dandelionministries.org, to see what else we're up to. You can also support the show in the show notes, or you can send us your questions and or prayer needs so that we can be praying for you. My email is in the show notes for you there. And we will catch you next time.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody.